Notice is hereby given that a meeting of the City Council Committee on Administration and Finance, co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, will hold the continuation of a public hearing on January 5th, 2023 at 6 p.m. to establish the Urban Center Housing Tax Increment Financing Program, Lee Fort Terrace, and Tax Increment Financing for Lee Fort Terrace. This meeting will be held in person at City Council Chambers, 93 Washington Street, second floor, and via remote participation in accordance with Chapter 107 of the Act of 2022. In-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, and the public may also participate, listen, and/or view this meeting while in progress via the remote participation platform Zoom through any one of the following ways: by following the link with password, or by calling in telephone US 877-853-5257 toll free, or 888-475-4499 toll free, webinar ID 881-2588-0196. Subcommittee meetings are held to take action for the purpose of making recommendations to the full council. City Council Committee on Administration and Finance, co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, held a public hearing in City Council Chambers on January 5th, 2023 at 6 p.m. for the purpose of discussing the Urban Center Housing Tax Increment Finance Program for Lee Fort Terrace and Tax Increment Financing for Lee Fort Terrace. Notice of this meeting was posted on December 19th, 2022 at 4:01 p.m. In attendance, we have all members of the committee: Councilor Hapworth, Councilor Merkel, Councilor Stott, and Councilor Watson-Felt. And joining us from the Committee of the Whole, we have Councilors Cohen, Councilor Varela, Councilor Dominguez. Who am I forgetting? Councilor Morcillo. How could I forget?
And Councilor Prasnewski.
And Councilor Prasnewski. Thank you. So, with that said, we will get started. I believe we have joining us this evening our representatives from Beacon. I see our planning director.
Amanda's participating remotely.
Amanda's participating remotely. I will get her upgraded.
And Kathy Hogue as well.
Did you hear Tom? He said Kathy Hogue as well.
I did. I just don't see her.
Oh, she's got her hand raised. See Hogue.
There we go. And I believe we will open with a presentation from Amanda Ciancola from the Planning Department. Amanda, you should be able to unmute.
No audio.
At the December 7th committee meeting, the committee had asked for 3 things from staff to come back with, and that's what was provided in that letter. The first item is a written response from the Department of Housing and Community Development regarding the UCH TIP area. And that they looked at the plan. And so that was included as an attachment, confirmation that DHCD has reviewed the plan and determined that it meets the program requirements as drafted. The area for the UCH TIP is included right in the plan. It's on page 2 and then referenced throughout the plan. The second item that the committee asked for is a copy of the Memorandum of Understanding between the Salem Housing Authority and Beacon Community Services. So that was provided. And then I try to excerpt out the section that we referred to at the last meeting. And that's regarding the 51 bedroom housing units that will be subject to Chapter 121B for the 99-year ground lease. The third item that the committee asked for was this cut sheet of affordability that just outlines the units, the depth of affordability, how it's regulated, the legal document that requires that affordability. And so that is identified on page 2 of the letter. And Beacon's going to go over that in more detail and show it on the screen so you all can see that, because I know there's a lot of numbers to look at there. So I'm going to hand it over to Beacon to go over a brief presentation and these numbers. And if you have any questions of staff, Tom Daniel will be available for questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Courtney, I'll promote you to a panelist so you can share your presentation with us. I will just note for members of the public in the room or members of the public at home that we will take public comment tonight following questions from the counselors. We'll limit public comment to 20 minutes, and I just want to remind any members of the public who would like to speak tonight that we are here to speak to the issue before us. We'll be discussing tax increment financing for Lee Fort Terrace. All commentary should be directed to the chair, which is myself. Commenters should refrain from commentary that is personal in nature or commentary that has nothing to do with the matter on the agenda tonight. Courtney.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Courtney Koslow with Beacon Communities here tonight to provide additional information on the Lee Fort Terrace UCH TIF agreement request that we have before you. So I'm going to share my screen. We have a very condensed version of the larger information packet that we sent you, but we felt that it was useful since we're all coming to this conversation with various exposure. All of you I know have been involved in seeing this project, but we thought we'd just give a little bit of background that we believe reflects some of the nature of the questions that we had heard. Give me one moment. Oh, actually, sorry, this is the wrong version. Okay. So the first thing we wanted to just note is remind everybody that what we're talking about here, we're talking about the details of a tax increment financing request, but really what we're aiming for is the evolution of Lee Fort Terrace into a new chapter. So not to belabor this, but it is 50 units that are obsolete financially and physically, and do not have any accessibility or space for the residents to really live there in the way that they need to. And in its place, we are proposing here that we'll have 124 units, 100% affordable, deed restricted for 99 years. It's intergenerational, accessible, and universally designed. We've had a huge focus on sustainability and climate resilience from the beginning. This will be passive house, all electric with solar panels on the top. It'll be built with the residential units well above the 2070 floodplain levels. We have an open space, a public open space in the front along Collins Cove, 1.25 acres, as well as a lot of wonderful amenities in the courtyard for residential use. In addition, we have a strong amount of wonderful amenities within the building for the residents: community center, fitness center, wellness office. We'll have resident service coordinators, and this is in a wonderful location. These residents deserve to have access to all that Salem offers, both as a wonderful city and all the services that are there. So just reminding us of that. And then I also wanted to talk for just a brief moment on why public-private partnerships and reminding us who we are here as Beacon. So we're Boston-based, mission-driven, for-profit, affordable housing developer, manager, and long-term owner. And we have a focus on living well by design, and that means both the way the buildings operate and the way that the people who live there can thrive. We have lots of focus on quality and being long-term owners. that is really important to us. We have a large presence in Massachusetts as well as in 13 states and have 19,000 apartments that we own and manage. And then public-private partnerships, this is the way that public housing gets redeveloped today. The government no longer invests in public housing, in new public housing. There's a huge backlog. And so the Salem Housing Authority took this initiative to find a way to save and rescue the existing these units here, as well as utilize their resources to provide even more affordable housing that's needed for the community. And Beacon, in this work that we do, we have the expertise. We have access to low-income housing tax credit investment that the Housing Authority couldn't do on its own. We are able to provide large guarantees that are required to do this type of affordable housing development. We know how to have compliance long-term with income restrictions that we need to maintain, as well as all of the inspections that are required with government-subsidized affordable housing. Also want to reiterate that this process with the community has been going on since the fall of 2020, so over 2 years, both at many different levels, meeting with the residents of Lee Fort Terrace and the Tenant Association, especially in regular conversation with Shannon Bailey, the president there, who's been an amazing advocate for the residents and making sure this is something they all will be able to enjoy and thrive in. We've had many meetings also with all the residents. They've been in person on the resident meetings. Arzella's tour of
Please do
Old
not
Colony.
shout in the gallery in this room. Maintain quiet while people are speaking at the podium. I'm sorry, Courtney, go ahead.
As well as community conversations. Should I continue or would you like? Okay. Community conversations in person and virtually. We've met with 75 individuals of all members of the community, had an open space planning group. We've had large community meetings, met with local groups as well. And then public hearings. There have been 8 public hearings between Zoning, Conservation Commission, and MIPA, not including actually the several here. So that's about 10. So the ample time for conversation. We have made changes as a result over this time. Not everything that everybody has asked for has come about, but we've made the building smaller, lower size, condensed it. We've switched from mixed income to 100% affordable. We've adjusted the architectural designs, made it an intergenerational development. And then I know people have been concerned to make sure that the residents are being taken care of during this temporary relocation, which we understand is anxiety provoking for people. It does have an impact on their lives, and we're going to do all that we can to minimize that, some of which is required by law. So the fund that we receive triggers the Federal Uniform Relocation Act that allows the right to return for all residents in the first selection of the units, and there'll be no cost to residents. That's required by law, and then we've gone above and beyond that by hiring a relocation specialist to work directly with residents. And their rent will be the same 30% of their income as it is now throughout this whole time, before, during, and after. And then just kind of moving perhaps more into the details of the TIF itself, and just to say why do we need this? So the funding gaps are inherent in affordable housing. The market doesn't provide this housing on its own, and the government realizes that, and that there's a mismatch. And as the government is working to fill the public good where the market doesn't otherwise, there are sources of financing and there are tools like this UCH TIF to fill those gaps, to incentivize affordable housing development. We're one of those developers that understand that and have learned how to use those tools to close those gaps. Affordable housing inherently has added costs that market rate housing doesn't. Because it is highly regulated, the compliance, as I mentioned, we have a large compliance team that makes sure that our income certifications happen correctly and that we're meeting every single property's specific affordable housing restriction. We also have major inspections. We have huge maintenance and operation teams that make sure that the affordable housing related inspections go well. And then there are prevailing wages in construction that are triggered by our their financing, and their design features like larger unit sizes that Department of Housing and Community Development requires, because previously units at 361 square feet that were allowed were not really livable. So they have different guidelines which add cost. Additionally, Leefort Terrace itself does have added expenses. The climate resiliency approaches and passive house design do add marginal but a cost to it. The publicly accessible open space doesn't have its own financing. We have to make that work here. And this extended and prolonged community process, all of the architects and consultants and all that we had at all those meetings, that does add to the cost as well. And then a reminder just of what it is here that we are requesting. On the left is a chart that, actually, I'll start in the middle. The blue bars, the dark blue bars on the bottom, where it says $41,814, is what the Somerville-Salem Housing Authority would pay today if they pay taxes, which they don't. That's based on today's assessed value. That amount stays throughout this 15-year TIF term. The gray bar represents what the new value will be of Leefort Terrace when it's renovated. Newly constructed. And we're proposing that over those 15 years, the first year, 100% of that incremental cost gets exempt. So we're only paying that $41,814 the first year. And then each year, as you see on the left, the exemption decreases and the amount of taxes we pay increases until we're at the full taxes. Total taxes paid in that time is $2.8 million, which is $2.8 million more than the city gets today in taxes for Salem. And it's an exemption of about $3 million less that we would otherwise have to pay. And then what that means for the project here, this is our financing stack. And so at top are the federal low-income housing tax credit investor equity. This is private money that comes in via an incentive of tax credits that will be allocated through funding rounds with the state. That's the chunk, federal and state, that you'll see below is most of our financing. The $20.1 million is a permanent mortgage before the TIF, so that's all we can afford based on the rents and incomes and operating costs. It's all we could afford, but it, as you can see, doesn't cover the costs. There are local, state, and federal affordable housing loans and energy efficiency rebates. There's a deferred developer fee, which is the maximum that we're allowed to defer per IRS rules. And then the $3.9 million at the bottom is that $3 million in the TIF leverages us. We're able to get a larger loan. The permanent mortgage will actually increase. That $20.1 million plus 3.9 is a permanent mortgage we'll be able to get because our operating expenses will be lower. It allows us to take on a larger loan. Why the 15 years of the TIF? The low-income housing tax credit investors are a part of this deal for 15 years. And as a part of that, that essentially comes down to that they need to show that this is consistent over that period of time in order for us to be competitive to get the equity that we need. And this TIF has been sized to that minimum amount that they need to see for that 15-year period. Then going into I have 3 more slides here to talk about affordability. And the questions that came up last time were around demonstrating in what ways will what we've been saying here about the affordability restrictions, how will that be proven? And so there are several ways and for different aspects of the way this is set up. So the first is how will those 50 existing Leefort units, the public housing units, be protected? So we, as was mentioned by Amanda, have a memorandum of understanding between Beacon and the Salem Housing Authority to undertake this work. In that is written what's here in italics, that 51-bedroom public housing units for 99 years will remain public housing units and residents will pay no more than they are now, essentially. So that is currently in our MOU, and it is also stated in the MOU that will become a ground lease. The DRO is a disposition agreement, and that is what keeps the ground owned by the land owned by the Housing Authority, and the development will be owned by Beacon, but this will underlie it for the Leefort 50 replacement units. So that's repeated here on the top of the graph. So the public housing replacement units, the legal document is a ground lease and a disposition that will be recorded. Currently, it's the MOU. In addition, when we apply, and which we're in the process of doing right now, for the tax credits for the Department of Housing and Community Development, in order to get those, we have to sign and record before we get the funds, tax credit regulatory agreement. And in that is where we have what we've been describing, where at least 25 units will have incomes of 30% of AMI or less, and the balance will have incomes at or below 60% of AMI or less. So I want to emphasize or less. If anyone under 60 includes people who make 10% AMI. We just have to demonstrate at least 25 will, and we know they will because we know not all of the 50 at Leaford currently are under 30. But those same people are still under 60%. So everybody is covered, including the 50 replacement units. And then on top of that, I have my last slide here to talk about the rent subsidies. So on top of all of that, the unit rent will be subsidized through Section 8 project-based vouchers, primarily Section 8 project-based vouchers from the Salem Housing Authority and a few through the Department of Housing and Community Development. So I'm going to refer to those as PBV, project-based vouchers. PBV income requirements are no more than 50% of AMI. So effectively, all units are 50% or AMI or less. So whatever income someone comes to, up to 50% or down to nothing, will be, if they're otherwise eligible, will be here. And this is recorded. This is documented through a housing assistance payment contract, a HAP contract, that will have, as I've mentioned, HUD only allows those to be 20 years, but within the document, it has a renewable. It is renewable, and that would be our intent. So that is what I wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Do any of the counselors have questions for Courtney? Counselor Hapworth.
Thank you, Chair McLean. And thank you, Courtney, and thank you for all the information you provided us. Are you able to just talk through the list and the way that residents are placed on there? I know you and I have gone back and forth on that. Just wanted to, just for the public's information and for the council.
You're talking about the wait list for the project-based
Right.
vouchers. Yes. So the Salem Housing Authority has 108 project-based vouchers that they'll be providing here, and their administrative plan, HUD requires that project-based vouchers be the wait list be managed by the Housing Authority who's authorizing that. That is in the regulations. I could actually pull up the slide if you like, but I have it documented toward the back of the larger presentation. There's a specific CFR that governs that, and it states that the wait list must be managed by the Housing Authority. And then further, that the Housing Authority could have a specific project-based wait list for the project-based voucher. So Leafort will have its own wait list, and all of that will be the Salem Housing Authority's administrative plan for Section 8, which they exist, then has further preferences for a strong local preference, a strong very low income preference. So those will govern for those 108 units.
Thank you. So when we say 60% AMI and 30% AMI, I think, is it fair to say these are not units that are hitting the open market? These are units that are going to be filled by the Salem Housing Authority wait list. Correct. Okay. Thank you.
There'll also be those 8 other 16 units will have their own little wait lists as well, but the 108 units are through the Salem Housing Authority.
Councilor Stott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was a great question, definitely one that I've had on my brain. And I think that perhaps is where the partnership with the Salem Housing Authority comes in. And I just want to, I guess, repose the same question, which is going to be so annoying, but to make sure that I understand. So would you kind of summarize that is where the partnership comes in, that you have these numbers that you need to hit and meet in order to get your funding to complete the project, but Salem Housing Authority can choose their own numbers in requirements for the units and projects that they want the residents to be in. So if you have the 60% as like the ceiling, Salem Housing Authority, and Kathy might be able to speak to this better, will have her own kind of, like, I don't know what the current requirements are for Lee Fort Terrace and how it ended up as it is now, but I'm assuming that's more Salem Housing Authority than Beacon would be involved in. Is that correct?
Correct. That is one of a few ways in which the partnership exists, but that is a significant one, that the Housing Authority's admin plan and wait list will determine how to prioritize residents, as like they have local, and Kathy, you may be able to speak to this, but local preferences and others that will govern here. So in that way, they have a significant impact on the nature of the residents who are there at the unit. They also have, as a ground lease lessee, they're a partner in that they own the land and will have obligations to them that we must uphold the things that we are saying that we're doing in the ground lease, like those 50 public housing units being maintained. That's another way the partnership is held. Kathy has her hand raised.
Kathy, you should be unmuted already if you'd like to speak.
Thank you, Councilor McLean. Appreciate that. I just wanted to add to Courtney's comments. I would second that is one of many ways in which we are partnering with Beacon Communities through this project, for sure. And this is one of the areas that gets a little bit convoluted, so I'll try to explain it as best as I can. The project-based vouchers are operated through a different type of program than Lee Fort currently is at the present time. So Lee Fort is a state-funded housing development, and project-based vouchers are a federally funded housing subsidy program. So the Housing Authority would be responsible for overseeing that those project-based vouchers are issued according to federal regulation. We'd be responsible for managing the wait list for those project-based vouchers and assuring that people on the wait list are qualified for them, and offering those qualified applicants to Beacon as units become available and they need to fill them. So that would be, a continued kind of piece of our partnership ongoing, for certain.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Chair McLean. Just one other thing, Courtney. Are you able to just talk through someone moving into a unit that was 60% AMI or deed restricted for 60% AMI? How would we determine what they would pay?
We would, our compliance team, both the Housing Authority would do their own income certification. They would also send them on to Beacon, who will be managing the property. We will look at that. And once we've gone through and certified that the income is in fact what they say, it will be set at 30% of their income, including utilities. Utilities will be paid for by the landlord here.
Thank you. So no matter what they're making, the key thing to remember is the 30% AMI, or I'm sorry, the 30% of their income that they're paying.
Correct. And the project, with the project-based vouchers, the subsidy itself covers the difference between that and the fair market rent.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Councilor Dominguez.
Thank you, Chair McCarthy, being a member of the committee. I want to thank presenter for a great presentation, good information on it. I had a couple of questions that I wanted to ask. My first question is in regard, can you elaborate a little bit more in what type of plan do you have to inform the existing residents on how they're going to be relocated back to their normal place? That's my first question. Go ahead.
Yes, so we will be, we're starting the process now of actually putting in writing our resident relocation plan. So we'll be working, as I've said a few times, with the Housing Opportunities Unlimited, who specializes in affordable housing relocation, because it is governed by a lot of regulations and we want to make sure to do it correctly. So we'll be evaluating the available one-bedroom units within the Salem Housing Authority's portfolio. Kathy will be working with the public housing side of DHCD to hold units vacant in their existing portfolio, to start holding Leafort units vacant in their portfolio. And then HOU will meet with residents and learn their specific needs to figure out what the best placement is. They'll also likely need to find, given how many how few one bedrooms there are in this Housing Authority's portfolio, we'll need to find other locations, ideally within Salem, where we could temporarily move residents to.
Thank you, if I may. Does mean you already have a plan in place and you already started to present it to the tenants? And I suspect that it's being done in bilingual. As you know, there's many Spanish speaker tenants at that location, which sometimes are lack of communication.
Yes.
Will you have that in mind?
Absolutely. Actually, HOU has 12 different languages that their employees speak. It's women-owned and run primarily by women who are Latin American. And so there's a very, very strong Spanish-speaking employee base within HOU, in addition to the other languages. We've always been translating all of our, and having interpreters and translation of our meetings in both Spanish and Armenian, because there are Armenian speakers at Leafort as well. So we've, as absolutely front of mind to make sure everyone, and actually the federal Uniform Relocation Act does require that as well. So we're very much on top of it.
Thank you. I have another two more questions, if I may. My second question is, there is any preference system that you will put in place for Salem residents, not only for the 50 unit, but for the entire project? And how can this, that be reassured to the public that in case this has been approved or the projects went through, Salem residents will have some alleviation in the housing crisis that we so call it here in Salem? So
I'm going to pull up again the slide that I had just kind of shown but not actually spoken through. These are some of the key priorities that the Salem Housing Authority currently has in their admin plan, which will apply to Leafort Terrace. So the first one you'll see is a local priority for those who live or work in Salem or are veterans. So those 108 units, so almost all of the units will have a local priority. In addition to here, just to say again, a priority for even lower income, 40% rent burdened. So that will be in place for those units.
Thank you. My last and final question at this moment. I don't know if you're the one that answer me or answer the public this general question that I want to ask. If we put this in a very prospective way, why do we need a whole zone change for this project? What is the reason why we need a whole zone change to implement this TIF that we are talking about here tonight?
Could you say that again? I couldn't catch one of the words.
Why do we need a whole new zone proposal in order for us to go through, move forward in this project?
Sure. And I want to clarify, Amanda said this, but I just want to make, because not everybody was at the last meeting. The UCH Urban Center Housing TIF program is a state program to help support affordable housing developments specifically. And it allows for a city, a town to create a plan that identifies an area for which this TIF can be applied. And then if there's a project within that area that has a TIF they'd like to request, at the same time we could put, or as we are today, putting our agreement forward. The guidelines for UCH TIF, the state program, are such that the TIF area has to meet certain designations, certain qualifications. Commercial is part of it. So but it is only for affordable housing. So we had to create a zone. It's not, I just want to be clear, we're not rezoning anything. It's an overlay area that designate, with Leaford is a part of, which makes us qualify for this affordable housing tool. Nothing else within that zone actually qualifies for the tool. There's nothing that could be. It's just to create a zone as part of the plan that DHCD agreed, as Amanda said, our area meets the definition of the program area, and Leaford Terrace could therefore put forth this TIF agreement. And so it does, and as Amanda said, just like HDIP, the whole city is an actual area. HDIP, which is the mixed income tax increment financing tool, the whole city is the area. It started small, but you could apply if you want. So if in the future, yeah, this area is only really able to be for Leaford.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair McLean. Not being a member of the committee, if I could ask a question through you to Kathy Hogue, and that would be, I do believe at one of the previous meetings, there was discussion about the value of these types of vouchers, that they remain with the property and not follow the, someone, so that it would keep the number at the highest level possible.
So I can answer that if that's okay, Chair McLean.
Yes, please.
So we did mention at the last meeting that the way project-based vouchers work is they're attached to a particular development. They are not a mobile voucher. The housing choice voucher is a different type of voucher that can travel with someone really anywhere across the United States. A project-based voucher is assigned to a specific development. So these vouchers will stay with Leaford Terrace, and that's why they have their own very specific wait list as well, because they stay with this particular development. The housing assistance payment that's attached to the voucher that goes to the landlord is based on the fair market rent of the area, and that's determined on an annual basis by HUD. It's a federal determination based on fair market rents in the area, and Salem is lumped in with the Boston-Cambridge metro area. So annually, we would get a determination on what the fair market rents are, and that's how the housing assistance payments and the payment standards are determined by the Housing Authority.
Thank you, Kathy. Any follow-ups, Councilor Cohen?
No, thank you, Chair McLean.
Any other questions or comments from members of the council? Okay. That being said, I believe we will open up to public comment at this time.
Thank you.
We have some members of the public as attendees at home and some members of the public here in the room with us. I think what we'll do is we will start on the far right-hand side of the room and kind of work our way around for those who might like to offer comment tonight. And I will mix in some of the folks at home who have their hands raised so that they don't have to wait the entire time. I would just like to remind members of the public who are commenting tonight to restrict their comments to the issue that is before us, which is the establishment of this tax increment zone in Salem and then passing the subsequent financing. Please direct your questions to me, the chair, or your comments to me, the chair. I'll keep track of any questions that arise, and we will be able to deliver them to our presenters at the end of the meeting so that they can respond to any lingering questions. And I'll also remind members of the public who are commenting tonight, when it's not your turn to speak, to please give other people the floor, allow them to make their comments and questions. I realize that this is a issue in our city that many people are very, very passionate about. We've been discussing it for some time, but we want to make sure that we're giving everybody a chance to be heard and that we're respecting the space. So, Mr. Kapantis, you are welcome.
Thanks, Jeff. First, I just want to make a quick comment about setting a 20-minute time limit. Public comment is free speech. It is limited free speech, meaning time, manner, and place. This is a continuation of a meeting that was already set up. So that precedent still stands. You can't now continue a meeting and then limit it. So I hope that you allow everybody here from the public to speak and don't violate the First Amendment rights as a continuation. Next, this is a project that's been going on for a long time. In fact, earlier than October. October is when their request for proposal came in. I first got involved in this. Prior to that, it was in the summer, I remember attending an Affordable Housing Trust Fund meeting and first learned of this proposal. Back then, it was different. It was 224 units. After that, the city sent out letters to the residents and to the abutters and said, we're looking at replacing 50 units with 50. So there was the first miscommunication that we had on this project. Subsequent to that, when they presented the project the first time, they put forth a plan that had 8.2% affordability. And then when we called them out on it and challenged them, they said, we have to agree to disagree on how you're calculating percentage. So if you think that we're upset, part of this comes from then when we come to the council and we ask them, we said, ask the questions and believe the answers. How can I believe the answers under that precedent? That we're going to change the rules of something that was established 2,000 years ago by ancient Romans on how to calculate percentage. So if you think that we may question some of the things that we hear. Next, we have 50 units there. Currently, 3 are empty. 46 of the 47 families earn less than 30%. And the 47th can't really be determined because that last range had a range from like 30,000 to 450,000. So to make the statement that this family's there above 30%, I don't know how a developer would know that unless there was personal information shared. But in all sense, we have 50 units. We may have 50. We may or may not have 50 is the way this is being presented by them. And it's the way the councilors speak. I listen to the councilors. I hear one councilor say, we need to provide affordable housing at all levels. I agree with that, at all levels, from 30% up to 100%, or even from 0% up to 150% of AMI, whatever that is, right? But it can't be at the demise or degradation of current units. We have 50 units, and we need to maintain the 50. I have councilors that have made statements either in emails, on social media, in public meetings. Well, we very well may have more than 50. Or they use terms like virtually guaranteed. What is virtually guaranteed? Almost guaranteed? What I want, what I expect from this council regarding this is that we get the best in return for the 3 million or the 2.8 million, and it will be more. Read the information that has been submitted. They have already said they will need additional money from the city, from the state, and from the feds. And I don't have an issue with additional money. I'm the first guy that said maybe perhaps we should start our own fund and pay for our own affordable housing. Maybe the best deal is we don't give them 2.8, you have to give them 3.8. And then they've put all of this information up here tonight. How many of the councilors here have read the actual contract? It's not written yet. So we get the cart before the horse. We're going to say, here you go, here's the 2.8 million. And I'm all for partnerships, and I hope the partnership lasts, and I hope it comes through. And yes, Salem Housing Authority with the waiting list will always maintain 50. That's not guaranteed here. And partnerships don't always last. And there's disputes in partnerships, in every partnership. In my marriage of 30 years, you think I haven't had a dispute in 30 years? In all of my business dealings, you don't think I've ever had disputes with people? How are those disputes settled? It's by the contract that's signed. It's bound by 4 corners of a piece of paper. And in that contract, they're only required to offer 17 units for people that are earning less than 30%. This council can do better. I've seen the emails from the developer. There's room for negotiation. Have you asked them for their financials? I have. I have them. I have their original plan. How many of these councilors took the time to go into and look at it? Have you asked them for their prospectus on profitability, what they shared with their investors on this project? If we give them another million, how much better can we do? TIFs are a great tool. They've always been used. When we go into an area, it helps blighted neighborhoods. And in this instance, I think this is the best use of a TIF in our history of the city of Salem. Let's use TIF money to create affordable housing. But you know what? You're not there. I don't think you should be approving this unless it's contingent upon a couple of things. One, the council needs to look at the contract, and you should be demanding 50 units guaranteed for 99 years for those earning less than 30%. If it's at an additional cost, so be it. It's over a 15-year period on tax money we don't receive today. Don't just sit here and accept what's being brought. Get what's best for the city. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, you're correct. I'm sorry, Mr. Kapantis, can you add your name and address to the record, please?
Absolutely. Steve Kapantis, 23 Wisteria Street, Salem, Mass.
Thank you. I will take a comment from the land of Zoom. I see Pat Kazemba with their hand raised. Pat, you should be able to talk.
Thank you, Councilor McLean. I appreciate it. Good evening. I'm Pat Kazemba. I live at 17 Sutton Ave, Salem Willows. I am also co-chair of SAFE, Salem Alliance for the Environment. I want to underscore that since the beginning of this project, Salem Alliance for the Environment has been a strong supporter. We note with great joy that this proposed project is one of the most sustainable and resilient projects that will exist in the city of Salem. And we congratulate everybody who's been working on this. I want to say also at the outset that seniors, low income, and physically challenged folks deserve great places to live. And Lee Fort Terrace will be a gem environmentally and I think economically for so many people in our city. The project has gone through all of the appropriate city boards and now reaches you asking for support for the tax increment financing. And I think I want to say that I support this wholeheartedly. Using an instrument such as the TIF to make the economics of a project that is as resilient and environmentally advanced as this one is just a great use. And I believe in the past that TIFs have been used to support like A&J King's, Tropical Products, and others. And this is the first time that it'll be used for a public housing project in our city. And I think this is a fantastic use of that financial instrument. And I want to encourage the city council to create this instrument in Salem and to go ahead and support it because our neighborhoods deserve great projects like these, and I hope that the environmental standards that this project reaches will become a new kind of standard for the city of Salem. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who is the next resident who would like to speak to the right? Approach the podium, name and address for the record, please.
Hi again, my name is Shannon Bailey. I live at 32 Lee Fort Terrace, and I'm president of the local tenant organization there, the Lee Fort Terrace Tenants Association. I was here last time, and I spoke very verbally about people believing because we're an elderly disabled community that we're a bunch of idiots and don't know what's going on here, and we're blind to what's going on, and I beg to differ. I am the youngest living resident there. I've been living there since I was 25 years old, and that was 21 years ago. So pretty much I'm a lifelong resident there because I'm severely disabled. I'm going to speak upon the TIF and the benefits it's going to have, but I do want to make some assurances that I've been in constant contact with Beacon throughout this entire process, not just me, but the whole LTO itself. We've had meetings with them. We've had meetings with residents that have shown up for those meetings. And I'd like to refute any claims that the Beacon has not tried to reach out to residents at Lee Fort Terrace, because they have tried. Many have come. Many have not come. Some showed up with the whole entourage of people. And it was on private property, which Salem Housing Authority is. It is not, by law, a member of the city of Salem, from which I verified with Kathy Hoag myself. The entire street, the whole property, is its own entity. So back to what I was going to. I've been working hard for the residents. It is unsafe. Just last week, our whole street flooded. You can't see the sidewalks. I actually took pictures if anybody would like to take a look at them. Later on, my car got stuck in the flood zone a little bit, and I lease a vehicle. Some got in my thing. But the point is, people had to park all the way back on Fort Ave to get away from the flooding. And it's not the first time that happened, and it won't be the last. And it's getting worse and worse. It's a severe problem, and I don't think anybody's actually taken into consideration that what you don't realize is in 10 to 15 years, and this is the projection, those 50 units are gone. Bye-bye, hasta la vista. They will no longer be livable, if not just by the flooding issues, but by the degradation. The floors go like this at a slant. If I sit in my wheelchair, not a wheelchair, but you know what I mean, a wheeled chair, in my LTO office, lift my feet up, I roll right to the wall. And it's not even a joke. I can show you myself, because the foundations are cracking. Now, housing and public housing and the government can't afford to keep up with this. And I understand a lot of the residents here are worried about the moving and whatnot like that. I'm not going to be alive in 10 to 15 years. I don't care. Well, what about me? What about the future people that are coming in? Is that fair? My job as the LTO president isn't to listen to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 voices. It's to do what's best for the residents living there. And I would not be standing here in favor of that if I wasn't doing that. If I just wanted to listen to everybody who wanted to complain about this project, then sure, I would do it. But that's not my job. My job is to protect the rights of my citizens. And we now have an attorney. Her name is Elizabeth Ross. She is out of Boston. She has worked with Beacon before. And she is getting an MOU between us, the tenants, housing, and Beacon. So we're in the process of doing that now, from which we have a stipulation that Beacon is going to be paying all of legal expenses for it, and putting out beyond the scope that if this project fails or if we need future legalization, legal help, they will cover that as well to extend that scope. So to sit here and say that Beacon is not doing and putting their best foot forward. Now, I will tell you, we had an invitation to go into Boston to see one of their newly developed projects called Old Colony in Boston. It was beautiful. We spoke with the tenants. Now, the LTO president there, I'm not even kidding, she came up to me and the very first words that came out of her mouth was, "Beacon sucks." I'm not even kidding. But when she said was things that were just what any new management company would complain about, little intricacies and things that wouldn't even affect us because they're 12 buildings versus our 1. So it didn't even affect us. And even her friend at the end sat there and said, "Oh, Phyllis tried for years and years and years and years not to come to Beacon, but she came." And nobody has to come back. Nobody's forcing these people to come back. If they find a new home, the one thing that housing cannot do is kick you out. They have to find you a place to live. That's the law. There's no, as much as people want to think otherwise. That is the law. And for a city that is in such dire need of housing, of affordable housing, I don't see how this is a bad thing. Now, to go for the TIF, you guys, we are legitimately what people think we are. We are burdens upon society. We only pay taxes through going to the store, buying, simple things. But now we will actually be contributing because now Salem Housing has not paid property taxes on this land since it's owned it. Now the city of Salem will start to get retribution from that. You'll start to get money until the full amount. I'm sorry, but I don't see how that is a negative thing. And we've all been guaranteed our units back. That was from the very beginning. Kathy said it before we even knew Beacon was going to be a part of this, before that contract was even conceived of. I've known that from the very beginning. I've tried to be open and honest with my tenants, but unfortunately, most of the people who live at Lee Fort, who are here tonight, have not asked me questions. Not one of them has approached me. Nobody. So I understand the ignorance in that they don't know what's going on because we haven't spoken, but I have tried. But that's all. I won't keep your time anymore. Thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thank you. We're going to hear all members of the public that are here with us tonight and here in the audience, but I do want to urge people to really do their best to stick closely to the issue at hand. We're about 15 minutes into our comments and we've heard from 3 folks, so we could be here for quite a while. If anybody participating remotely would like to make a comment, please raise your hand. I see a phone number ending in 398. I'm going to allow you to talk. Phone number ending in 398. You should be able to unmute.
Hello there. I'm sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. My name is Justin Whittier, 10 River Street. All right, so first, I just want to say that, echoing Steve Kapandas here, we're putting the cart before the horse. We're talking about this financing for the Lee Fort Terrace without first deciding whether this, whether the UCH TIF is even appropriate for this area, whether it meets the criteria that are laid out in Massachusetts 760 CMR 58, which, as you know, I have sent to all the council. And in doing so, I've given you a number of reasons to believe that this doesn't meet the criteria laid out therein. I'll just cite a couple. This UCH TIF is intended for areas, quote, which are predominantly commercial with high business or commercial use. Again, an area used primarily for commerce or for business, a commercial center with a need for multi-unit residential properties. It also has to satisfy Section 60A, number 1, which is about encouraging increased commercial growth of manufacturing facilities, which have been in town for not less than 2 years. Maybe H&H and the power plant qualify this, but I mean, that's quite a stretch for trying to satisfy a zone for this. So, second, as Councilor Domingo just correctly pointed out tonight, what we're doing is creating a zone. This isn't just about Lee Fort Terrace. Ms. Kozlow tonight misstated. This is not just about Lee Fort Terrace. This is a zone in which each property within that zone would then become eligible for similar treatment. It incentivizes that development. And I will also just mention that in Ms. Kozlow's presentation, she herself said that, quote, it incentivizes affordable housing development. Now, aside from that, on the merits of this particular project, I want to agree with Steve Kapantis here that we have yet to hear any guarantees, and I want to emphasize guarantees that all current residents will be able to return at a rate they can afford. That is not what we've heard tonight. We've heard about project-based vouchers, which are administered by the federal government, which is different from how it's being done now. So we don't have certainty there. And we need to have certainty. I hope you as a council will have certainty before you approve anything like this. And it's important that you remember that whether or not you support the redevelopment of Lee Fort Terrace, this UCH TIF zone is a separate question. It encompasses other properties besides Lee Fort Terrace. Bentley School, the park, the power plant, and areas of the neighborhood. This is much bigger than that. And so far tonight, we haven't addressed that at all. That's a big problem. There are other methods of finance to help support, affordable development. There are numerous ones, and I have yet to hear anyone explore whether or not they have satisfactorily determined that none of those other avenues are available. So, I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. We heard his question. He hung up. Further comment in the room tonight? Please approach the podium. Just your name and address for the record, please.
I'm gonna read this. I sent a statement to the city councilors today.
Sure. Can you just read your name and address into the microphone,
My
please?
name is Susan Kirby. I live at Morency Manor at 45 St. Peter Street in Salem.
Thank you.
Morency Manor is part of the Salem Housing Authority. I'm speaking to express my support for the Urban Center Housing Tax Increment Finance Program and tax increment financing that you are voting on this evening. This tax program is crucial to the redevelopment of Lee Fort Terrace, and that redevelopment is crucial to the tenants who live there and another 124 people or about people in dire need of affordable housing who live in Salem. I am currently the president of the Morency Tenant Association or organization. I assisted the Lee Fort Terrace tenants in the summer of 2020 with their creation of the Lee Fort Tenants Organization. It was and still is essential that the men and women who live at Lee Fort Terrace have a seat at the table as decisions are being made. They have been able to do that. Anyone who portrays the Lee Fort Terrace tenants as victims of displacement are wrong. While no one wants to go through the hassle of moving twice, the resulting redevelopment of these apartments are called for. The condition of the units are poor, subject to flooding, and they are not ADA accessible. It is questionable whether the development could exist another decade if this redevelopment does not go forward. I know others here have raised the steps being taken to address changes in the environment and energy efficiency. There is a lot to be said for new affordable construction in Salem and across the country for that matter. This is a good use of public tax relief. I urge you to vote it through tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for your succinct comments. If anybody participating remotely would like to raise their hand to make comment, you may do so. I don't see any comments from the field. We'll move to the next comment in the room. Please approach the podium. Oh, great. Please approach the podium. Name and address for the record.
Stacia Kraft, 140 Federal. So we all agree Salem's a great place to live. and we agree that we need more affordable housing. And we also agree that this is located in a flood zone. So I think that we just have different ideas about what we next should do. My big question has been, this is a flood zone, we acknowledge it. Why would we add more people to an area that we know is dangerous to live in now and is expected to be dangerous in 10 years? So the questions that need to be answered are, how long is this going to be viable? So we're investing in a lot of money, this TIF money. How long will it be viable? Who's going to be responsible for the people when it's inundated and they have to be moved? Those are questions regarding that. The idea of this new zoning overlay, including the Bentley School, we know that the city has been studying the schools and development of housing in the schools. So I think we need to consider that if we say yes to this TIF, and we say yes, that we're going to privatize our care of our elderly, we're going to hand the care to a private institution. Are we ready to do that? Because if we set the precedent here at Lee Fort Terrace, then I think we should all expect the next one will be Pioneer Terrace, and with that, possibly the Saltonstall School with its great water views. I don't understand why would we develop there in these areas except for the water views. Otherwise, we would be asking Beacon to build somewhere else away from the water. I don't understand it. So those are questions I feel like you need to get the answers to before you make a commitment on this TIF. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no hands in the audience in Zoom, we'll continue to the next comment in the room. We're just moving from right to left, so please approach the podium, name and address for the record.
Kathy Hopper, 3 Allen Street. My question is, won't the city need the full taxation for prevention and remediation of the flooding that's coming? And we got a preview of that 2 weeks ago in Salem, Bridge Street, this area, Lee Fort Terrace area, and others. Why are we lowering taxes when I think we'll need that money? And the other question is Beacon going to pull out of this project if we don't give them this tax break? That's it.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Frank Kulik. I live at 3 Allen Street.
Thank you. Speak right into the microphone.
Is that better? A little better?
A little closer.
Frank Kulik, 3 Allen Street. I'd like to reinforce Justin Whittier's concerns about the zone. This is primarily, if you drive up near Settlers Way, it's primarily a residential area. The criteria in order to create this zone is that it be a commercial area. It's clearly not a commercial area, no matter how you look at it. Creating this zone opens it up to new development. New development that, if you look around the area, is not compatible to a primarily residential area. There are concerns about the floodplain and all sorts of concerns, but I think it's a real stretch of the English language to read the parameters of and requisites for creating one of these zones to think that it's appropriate to create this zone to start with. So I agree with him, the cart's way before the horse. It's quite an elaborate presentation made earlier about what this will all look like. But I would be I wonder how many members of the council have actually read the plain English that outline the requisites for creation of this particular zone. I'm not necessarily against the project as a standalone project, but the zone is another issue altogether. And I think it deserves a lot more scrutiny than it's got. And I would like to see as much conversation concerning the appropriateness of creating this zone as gone into all the eloquence about what these apartments are going to look like and how nice they're going to be and all the rest of it. I think it stretches the literacy of the city council if you read all of this stuff and understood it, how you could draw the conclusion that this qualifies as the zone that you're about to approve. And I mean this most sincerely. Just read it. I don't think you have to stretch it too far to think we're trying to put a size 10 foot in a size 4 shoe. It just doesn't fit. It's English. The dictionary dictates what English words mean. So please give this a good look before you vote to make this zone. This zone is going to be a big change for that area, for that primarily residential area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll remind members of the public participating in Zoom that you can raise your hand if you would like to make comment, and in the meantime, we will continue with the commentary in the room.
I should be recovering right now. I had a bailout on surgery. I did a steroid shot yesterday to be here, so it was affecting my disposition, and I don't even want to be here.
I hope you're feeling okay. Can you add your name and address to the record,
My name is Joseph
please?
Doyle. I live in Leaford Terrace. And someone brought up Rome earlier, and then Julius Caesar said divide and conquer. We haven't even met the threshold to even be here, to have a vote and a consideration in the first place. There were no meetings, no matter who submitted paperwork. Beacon says, we talked to residents. Nobody has talked to me. Shannon says she represents the community. She represents about 6 people. Everyone considers her a sellout.
Sir, please restrict your comments to the matter before us,
It
not
is,
to other
because
members
all
of
I'm
the
getting
public
is
in the room.
George Santos action across here. No one seems to want to deal with the truth. The gentleman who talked about Webb Street, the only consideration, number one, shouldn't be giving millions of dollars to a multi-billion-dollar corporation out of Delaware and Philly who just opened an office in Boston. The number one consideration should be the 50 human beings that are living there in different degrees of stress. That's the number one, and it seems to be the last consideration. The gentleman from Webb Street says no matter what, 50 units should be put aside, and they should be at the situation they are right now with no stress to any residents, and that's what should happen. Now, they took away our common area. And when I talked about it December 7th, which December 7th, the people who initially had the mission statement for Leaford Terrace, who brought into fact what noise pollution is, especially if you have heart and respiratory problems, which is going to be gone with the type of din that will come in there. They have finally cleaned out the office. We got a memorandum I had up with a few that I had here. Get us into the common area again. Get everybody in there so we can come to a consensus, because nobody is really talking. Shannon does not talk for the residents of Leaford Terrace.
Please restrict your comments to the matter before us. They had their
Well,
time.
it's
you have
Leaford
your
Terrace I'm talking about. And once again, I have to get back to the George Santos stuff. There's a lot of misinformation, disinformation that's being spewed here. And there's only one thing that should be talked about: the security and safety and peace and harmony of the 50 people that are there. As far as this being on a floodplain, most of the city's on a floodplain. And over 50 years, I've been able to catch up with someone that's never been an issue at Leaford. There's never been any flooding. Nothing has ever happened. And you've got Raymond Road, your Commercial Street. It means there's flooding all the time in Salem. There's never been an issue. We clean up the plumbing in there to be a little less going on in there. But to me, it's trying to get us all together at the common area that Kathy Hogue has finally pulled out of their office, and getting us in there and getting all the residents finally in there having a meeting and coming to a general consensus we could end a lot of this. and see which way it's going to go. But without having some sort of a judicial oversight, and I passed out some other stuff on Beacon. Beacon has signed deals before with governments and other entities and violated them. It's classic Donald Trump situation. I know I'm right. You have access to the courts, but you don't have the resources to fight us. So we're here today. There's a lawyer. I've never heard about it. So we got a lawyer chosen by Beacon, financed by Beacon, actually working for Beacon. I'd rather find an independent lawyer that works the federal circuit that has no interest at all from an independent fund to represent the relatives, the residents at Lee Ford Terrace, as opposed to a complete Beacon fingerprint. Listen, I passed that stuff out. It's obvious. I still would like to know how this place was found. Whose idea was it? When was it? Who put it forward? Because those are critical questions. There's something wrong here. I just can't put a finger on it, but it definitely exists. And anything that has anything to do to put any burden or any question at all for the 50 residents in there turns this whole thing into a bogus situation. Something's going on. I just don't know what it is. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take a comment from Zoom. Ellen Simpson, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I sent an email in, but luckily I was able to Zoom in, so you can disregard that.
Can you just can you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, I'm Ellen Simpson. I live at 1 Geneva Street. So I'm very happy that we have this opportunity to create more affordable housing in Salem, which we desperately need. I was lucky to purchase my first home in Salem over 24 years ago when housing costs were more reasonable. I'm also lucky to be middle class and currently able-bodied. I want other people to have the opportunity to be here with us in this great small city, whether they work in one of our many restaurants or retail stores, or they're a retiree on a fixed income, and or are living with a disability. Each of us has had help in getting to where we are now in life, including all of the people who have spoken tonight. Let's bring others along with us by creating opportunities for people who need it. This is a beautiful development, and it not incidentally allows for rising sea levels and limits contributions to climate change. This is a great opportunity for us to bring others along with us, and I look forward to seeing it completed. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Seeing no further hands raised in Zoom, or is there anybody else in the room with us who would like to comment? Please. Please state your name and address for the record before you begin speaking.
Yep, I know this routine. My name is Gary. My middle name is Wayne. My last name is Gill. I want to tell you a quick story. It's going to take a couple seconds. 3 years ago, 72 Flint Street. Sorry about that. Hallstatt Salem Station, one of our brand new beautiful buildings with affordable housing. 3 years ago, I went to every meeting that this city had in regards to affordable housing. It took on for, how long did it go for? 6 or 7 years. And we still are here with nothing on the plate for the seniors or for the general public. I work at Steve's Market Grocery Store. I see every day everybody that's on the street. I see every day everybody that needs housing, affordable housing. That's where I thought I was going to have affordable housing when I moved 3 years ago from Salem Heights apartment building, which now they're getting a brand new building. Because of all the complaints and everything that I kept saying over and over again to Paul Tucker and Joan Lovely. They got a chunk of money. They're doing that now. So it will be back on the track for people to have affordable housing. To me, that building definitely was affordable. The building that I have the pleasure of living in now on the North River, which is a flood zone, a very big flood zone, and everybody is well aware of that, right, Megan? My rent in 3 years has gone up 3 different times. I got a job, I've been working, I've been focusing on trying to move up the ladder, just like everybody else. But every time I get a little money in the bank, the apartment building takes it away because they're gonna raise my rent. Even though I have a voucher that they don't give out anymore, it's a travel voucher. Those you only get from good credit, good inspections, and running the gambit with them and going through every loop that they make you jump through. I've been keeping it together. But this year, they just had me sign another contract. It went from $19.99, my very first year with free parking for 1 year at $50 a pop. It went to $23.75 in 1 year on me. I just re-signed my new lease in February. It's going up to $2,500 a month. That's taking more money out of my own pocket that I don't have already, plus everything else like gas I'm paying for my water, I'm paying for security over there, I'm paying insurance for the building itself at $2,500 I had to put down in order to have coverage for my unit. I get in there in the first year and the toilet broke from upstairs. It all came into my bathroom, my brand new, beautiful bathroom. So what I want to share with you, they're not affordable. 130 units over there, there's only 13 that are on vouchers. You will never see a travel voucher again. They don't give those away anymore. The only way that all of this is working is by your earned income, and you're all right there, but you all act like you don't know the numbers. Like you don't know how to multiply and add and subtract. It's very easy. When it comes to that, you're taking more money out of that person's pocket, even though all those rents are going up. And this one, it went up to $2,500. And they're still negotiating with the lawyers to see if I can get 24. But most likely, at the end of the day, it's going to be 25.
Gary, plus, would you like to offer any comment relative to Lee Fort Terrace?
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful design. I like the fact that it's a higher up for flood zone. We live in an 8 square mile, all of it's wetland. It's all been filled in. I think that you should take care of the 50 units that are there. They should get first priority. But everything else it's a little shady because in 3 years that I've been here at my building, I don't know what I'm going to do next year because they will go up another 150 because it's supply and demand. So I went through all these meetings here and all of this for affordable housing, but there's no affordable housing in Salem and there never will be. And you all are fooling yourself saying it, thinking that it's going to be. It's not, and you all know it. None of you have the problem of living in affordable housing. You don't have to, especially you.
Sir,
you know, a lot of people.
Don't do that.
Okay, but still.
Don't do that.
All right. But you still don't get it. You keep throwing around affordable housing, there's no affordable housing. And there's no way that you can come up with affordable housing because the increase in supply and demand is going to overrule everything else. I got 3 years out of the unit I'm in. I don't think I'm going to get another one. And I feel sorry for those 50 people that are seniors that are going to be down there. They're going to be stuck in the same situation that I'm stuck in. And they're older than I am. I just turned 64. So 3 years down the line for all 50 units over there, and they could be saying the same thing that I'm saying to you tonight. Thank you, Mr. McKay.
Thank you. I don't see any further commentary in Zoom. Please approach the podium. Name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Richard Stafford. I live at 30 Boardman Street here in Salem, in the Lee Fort Terrace neighborhood. First, this project has received all the necessary approvals from the City of Salem that it requires, so that really isn't before the board tonight. What you're being asked to do is act on creating an area with special privileges and then devising a contract that will presumably enhance this project. So the first thought I had is that there are a lot of questions with regard to whether this area will meet the requirements of the Department of Housing and Community Development. I would suggest, if the council is confident that it will, that it approve it, submit it to the DCHD and see what their reaction is going to be, rather than taking the next step, which will also be submitting the agreement that the city will negotiate with the developer. I was particularly concerned when the Bentley School was described at the last public hearing as being a commercial venture. I take great umbrage to the idea of thinking about public schools as being somehow commercial ventures. I don't think it's appropriate, and I don't think that the state is going to agree with that as well. So first, approve the plan if it's been presented to you, unless you want to make changes to it, and then submit it. But I would hold back on the agreement until you know that the plan is approved. That's the procedure that's also set forth in the state statute. Third, I'd like to know what the effect will be on this project in terms of going forward, how it operates, how it manages, if the council doesn't approve this. Is the impact going to be on the investors? What are the investor agreements called for? Is the impact going to be on the residents? Are they going to lose services? I've attended 30 meetings over the last 2.5, 3 years with Beacon representatives, with the Board of Appeals here in Salem, Housing Authority as well. And at no time did Beacon ever say that it needed a TIF in order to make this project financially workable. Never. My final comment would be that the financing on this is extraordinarily complex from my point of view. I don't feel qualified to look at it and say whether or not it's appropriate, whether or not it's in the best interest of the residents who are going to be served in the future, or whether or not the $3 million that the city is setting aside is going to wind up going to investors or going to the profit margin for Beacon. I'd much rather see those $3 million that are coming in tax revenue be set aside for future affordable housing needs that the city of Salem is clearly going to continue to have, whether this project is approved or not. Thank you.
Thank you. You may approach the podium for your commentary. I do want to remind anybody who's offering public comment tonight again, we are only talking about the creation of the TIF for Lee Fort Terrace. If there's some context you want to add about Lee Fort Terrace, that's fine. We are not talking about affordable housing writ large in the nation, and we are not directing comments to members of the council or other members of the audience in this room. Restrict your comments and direct them to the chair. We are not going to speak about people's character or intention or anything like that. I've had enough of that. I will warn you once if you do it, and then I will cut off your public comment.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and council members. My name is Bill Cass from 92 Columbus Avenue, and I would simply like to follow some of the other, or add to the previous comments about the applicability of the zone that they're talking about, which to me, in a straightforward reading, that just plain doesn't add up. I'd like to hear an explanation of how they find that that's an appropriate fit. We looked at the MassGov site and the UCHTIF definition of the requirements, and it just plain doesn't fit. Don't understand how they even get to this point with it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll remind members of the public participating remotely, you can raise your hands, and there we go. Is this Michelle Martin? I will allow you to talk. I hope I'm saying your name correctly.
Yeah, it's not Michelle, it's Michael Martin, but that's okay.
Sorry, Michael.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this via Zoom. I travel quite a bit and I don't get a chance to attend these meetings. The questions that I have regarding, the development at Lee Fort Terrace is, number one, I'd like to know who tracks down the questions that are being asked here, and when will the answers to those questions be made available, and by who? well, I already asked that, who's doing it. And the other concern I have is a safety concern. Now, I live at 144 Bayview Ave, Salem. Well, naturally, we know Salem, Massachusetts. But, so I'm a resident of the Willows. And Salem Willows is a peninsula. And you're talking about putting a large structure building right at the bottleneck for getting folks out of that neighborhood if they needed to evacuate that neighborhood. And I'd just like to see, some kind of study that's been made, what impact that might have safety-wise in the bottleneck. That's the only way out of the neighborhood. So that's the point I'd like to make. I'd like to know how we get the feedback from the questions that are asked, and also in regards to the question that I'm asking, which is, has there been a safety study in regards to the bottleneck for the neighbors getting out of the neighborhood? That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no further hands remotely, would anybody else in the chambers with us like to offer comment this evening? If anybody participating remotely would like to raise their hand at this time, please do so. Okay, seeing none for the moment, I will follow up on one of Michael's questions for myself and begin asking some of the questions that we've heard repeated here this evening. And I think the first one will be for Courtney, and it's a question that we've heard several times this evening, and it asks about the applicability of the construction of the zone. I think it would be good to hear that spoken to. A number of folks have raised the question of, is this appropriate? Is this going to meet the legal definition of the statute? How can we have those kinds of assurances, right? How do we know that Salem is entering into an agreement which is going to stand up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tom Daniel, Director of Planning and Community Development. So the program has requirements and guidelines that need to be met. It's administered through Department of Housing and Community Development. In order to come before the council with the proposed plan and the proposed agreement, DHCD needs to vet things before proceeding. DHC doesn't want a community to embark on this process only to find out that what they're proposing is something that DHCD cannot approve or will not approve. So many months ago, the city and Beacon met with the DHCD team that administers this program to talk about the project, talk about the area that was being proposed as the zone, the UCH plan area. I'm going to use plan area rather than the word zone, just to try and distinguish that it's a geographic area. And so through that, it was a conversation about what's required in terms of the area and the mix of sites. And so the DHCD team has reviewed this. They confirmed that the draft of the plan that was submitted meets the program requirements. And so DHCD has been satisfied that the plan meets the requirements, and that's why they said, go ahead and proceed with your local approval process. Had there been an issue, DHCD would have not allowed us to advance to the council for this process.
Thank you. Councilor Watson-Felt.
Thank you, Chair McLean. Just a follow-up question while we're on the topic, Tom and Mr. Daniel, thank you for being here. There was a comment made by Courtney earlier, and I wonder, Courtney could speak to it, but perhaps you can as well, which was, she made a comment during the presentation that not all of the other properties included in the plan, in the plan area, would qualify for further development for affordable housing. Can you speak to why that would be? And does it pertain to like taking, if we were to, so example, what is going on in my brain is if we were to say, okay, let's develop Bentley into affordable housing, that takes it out as a meeting of a requirement in the area. Is that why it wouldn't qualify? Or can you just talk more about that comment? That'd be great.
So I think I'd like Courtney respond directly to what she said, but just speaking about the program and so an area is defined, and then specific projects within that area come before the body for consideration for a specific tax increment financing agreement. The program allows for, both the area and an agreement to happen through the process contemporaneously because there's an efficiency there, or an area can be established and then over time someone can come forward and request to utilize the tool and have a specific tax increment financing agreement. So I think within this area, the only project that is being advanced is the Lee Fort project with a specific agreement. The Bentley School, I think we talked about this last meeting, if in the future the city determined that it no longer needed that facility, and if in complying with the city's disposition ordinance, it was prioritizing affordable housing, then this would be a tool that future developer could seek to utilize. But all those steps would require coming through the process here before you to negotiate that specific agreement. Did I answer your question?
Sort of. May I follow? Thanks, Chair. I think where I'm getting hung up is that as I recall, part of the requirements of the area includes the educational facility. Does it not?
So the program requires, so it is confusing when the term commercial is used because clearly a school is not a commercial use. But from this program's perspective, it's looking at non-residential uses that are a mix of things, whether it's a retail shop or a manufacturing, or, a school is not a commercial use, but it's not a residential use. And that mix of different types of uses in order to, as DHC has determined, that the plan conforms with the program requirements.
Right. And if we were to take the school out of inventory as an educational facility, do the other requirements, that other mix of non-residential uses still qualify, or does it no longer qualify? Is my question clear?
Yeah, I believe so.
Once a plan's established
right
before it's in place, the agreement is.
So I think if I may, is your question, if this area did not have the Bentley School in it, would it still qualify? Is that your question?
Sort of. We're close. I think my question is, down the line, if the school is no longer a school, does the plan still exist? I guess does it still meet the requirements of its establishment, or does it no longer? And if that's the case, what happens to the area?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is still.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Does Courtney want to further answer what she meant in her comment about some of the areas not qualifying?
Courtney, do you have anything to add to what Mr. Daniel said?
Thank you, Chair.
Sure, through the chair. What I meant was today's current underlying zoning and the current uses of each of those areas make it extremely difficult to become anything other than what they are now. So I'll go one by one. The Bentley School is a school. To dispose of it is an enormous process. It is needed as a school now. There's no reason not to. The city would need to make that decision. If you did, then you'd have to change the zoning after that. Someone would have to have a plan. And then they would have to come here with the TIF agreement. Just because a plan's in place doesn't then say everyone else after this in that is just given a TIF agreement. No, they then have to come and you have to decide. Many, many steps, many, many years, and a whole process that the city would have to decide if that's how you want to use your land. The park is a park. To make it not a park is extremely challenging and not anything anyone I think would want to do. So for housing to be on there, it's highly unlikely, and again, would come here because you all would need to decide that's how you'd prefer to use the land. On the other side of Leafort Terrace is a collection of we've been calling them underutilized parcels. Some of them are owned by the city, some could be owned, it's unclear who owns it. That land is contaminated. There's a sewer line that runs through it and a high pressure power line. The only thing that can really happen there is a park, which I think is a great idea, and you should all look into that. It would be wonderful. Use your brownfields money, clean it up, make a park. It could be parking. There cannot be a building. We were looking at it because it seemed like an interesting way to not have to have our one building in the middle of the site away from everything else. We could expand, we could make it less, it was not possible. And then there's a power plant, which is just converted recently, not too long ago, to natural gas, and it's going to be the laydown facility for the wind turbine. Those are all set uses. So for this to be, for anything to disincentivize affordable housing, which I don't actually think is a bad thing to incentivize affordable housing, but that's not what the plan is here. And to use money for something other than affordable, we're creating affordable housing. We need this money now we can do it now. And this is allowing this to move forward. So does that?
Thank you for clarifying your comment.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll take your public comment.
Thank you. My name is Sally Cass. I live at 92 Columbus Avenue in Salem. Would like to ask the council members, have any of you actually read the requirements for a UCHTIF agreement? Have you?
Yes.
Okay. This site does not meet any one of those requirements. I read the entire application process, and this site does not meet them. This meeting tonight was supposed to address just that issue. I have only heard 3 comments about that, and I have not heard any council members address that. I would appreciate it if you would, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Daniel, I do want to continue to pull at this thread a little bit. I do think it's worth addressing, I think, a real underlying question, which is this question of zoning, right? Both in the last meeting and tonight, there's been a little bit of an endeavor to steer clear of the word zone because it seems like it's causing confusion for people. So let's drive into it instead of avoiding it. Members of the community have a common understanding of what zoning is, right? Everybody has sort of a basic idea of zoning being something that tells me what I can and can't build in my city, right? And if I'm allowed to build something because the zoning says so, great. And if I'm not allowed to, then I can, apply for an exemption. I can go before the zoning board and they can make a decision about whether or not I'm allowed to. We're right now considering the creation of a UCHTIF zone, right? That's how it's termed. Can you explain how this differs from sort of the common understanding of zoning, right? Does this now create a situation where somebody can come in and do something different by right in terms of developing these properties? Does it create a condition where somebody can say, oh, I'll go to the zoning board and try to get an exemption to build this or that? Help clarify the difference of what's going on here so people really get it.
Sure, happy to do so. This does not, the UCH-TIF zone does not change the zoning. It does not change the use, permitted uses. It does not change the dimensional requirements. It does not touch or have anything to do at all with the City of Salem zoning ordinance. It's completely separate. It's the use of the word zone for this is defining a geographic area for this tool, within which this tool can be implemented.
Any follow-on questions from any other members of the council on this particular point? Okay, don't leave just yet. Okay.
Looking for that getaway.
Everybody's looking to get away. It's not getaway time, it's question time. So One of the other major points, we've talked quite a bit about this question of the eligibility and appropriateness of the zone, right? And we heard commentary from both yourself and from Courtney stating that you've already essentially had a conversation with DHCD and they've given you a preliminary approval of the draft plan. Okay. I want to ask you about the question of these 50 units, right? That's the other commentary that I've heard the most tonight. We're going to renovate this property. 50 units which are designated for public housing are going to become unavailable while it's under reconstruction. And then the guarantee is that they're going to go back. And a number of people tonight have expressed skepticism about that, right? These 50 units are not coming back, or maybe only 13 units are coming back. And how do we know, right? What is the legally binding instrument that guarantees that these units are going to come back? Can you speak to that point, please?
So I think Kathy Hoag might be the better person to speak to that because she is party to the deal. Our role has really been looking at the tool of the UCH TIF. So rather than misstating something, I would defer to Kathy or to Courtney on that, if that's allowed.
Sure. Kathy Hoag, are you still with us?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So we provided the council members with a copy of the Memorandum of Understanding between the Housing Authority and Beacon. And part of what is outlined in the memorandum is that through this process, the 50 public housing units will remain public housing units, and that folks will have the opportunity to return and pay the same rent that they're paying now, which is 30% of their income. So it's in part covered through our Memorandum of Understanding. We've also kind of outlined in the cut sheet, the number of years that each layer of subsidy is required. And we've indicated through that cut sheet as well that there is a 99-year ground lease, so that, folks will be essentially, protected for a minimum of 99 years.
Thank you for that information, Ms. Hoag. Follow-on question. So the memorandum of understanding, is this a legally binding document? Will the execution of the eventual contract between Lee Fort Terrace LLC and the City of Salem be determined by the contents of this document?
Yes, it will. In order for us to proceed, there will be a number of further documents that need to be signed through closing. We will have a number of legal binding documents in addition to the memorandum. But this is, a general guide in how we were to proceed from the beginning. And essentially kind of outlines the way our relationship will be established going forward. But there will be a number of additional legal binding documents that will also incorporate that language.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions or comments from members of the council on this point before we move forward? Or general questions or comments that they would like to direct right now? Councilor
Excuse me. Yeah, Mike Martin here again. I'm just curious. So after listening to the last comments, that the residents are guaranteed to get back there for 30% of their pay, but does that ensure that they won't have to pay additional fees that apply to living there, maintenance fees and other things that on the radar right now? I mean, sure, the rent would be 30%, but what about, other fees, I guess is my question.
Mr. Martin, I'm not sure what your question is in reference to. I don't think we were discussing a 30% threshold, but I will ask you to raise your hand in the future if you would like to offer a further comment.
Okay. So you didn't understand what I just asked. She mentioned that the residents would be able to return paying the same rent that they're paying now, which is 30% of their pay. And my question was, are there any guarantees then that they're not going to put additional fees into living at that place other than the rent, meaning maintenance fees, parking fees, I don't know, other fees? Is there any guarantee for those folks that way?
So, Ms. Hogue, I will ask you sort of a general question that I think will incorporate the question that was just asked by a member of the public. And I did hear another comment speak to this evening, and it's the question of the inevitable escalation of prices, right? The cost of housing, which is likely to rise over time just because that's what it's going to do. And so, can you speak to the question of how the likelihood of the per unit cost rising over time interacts with the availability of project-based vouchers and subsidies, and whether those prices will impact the percentage of income that people will have to pay in order to live in this property?
Sure, certainly, Chair. So the way the federal regulations govern a project-based voucher program is such that people will only pay a percentage of their income, regardless of what the rent is. So the housing assistance payments that go to the landlord are adjusted based on the fair market rent, which is determined annually by the federal government. However, the participants in the project-based voucher program will still only pay 30% of their income. So as a participant of a program such as this one, the participants aren't allowed to be charged any additional dollars outside the percentage of their income. So it's an income-based subsidy, and that's essentially what they pay, is a percentage of their income, which is 30%.
Thank you. Any further questions from members of the council? Councilor Marcello.
Thank you, Chair McLean. I just wanted to clarify something that was just said, and I think it was a slip of the tongue. The memo of understanding and the contract is between Beacon and the Salem Housing Authority, correct? Not the City of Salem. I just want to make sure that people understand that. Thank you.
Did you want me to answer that, Chairman?
Yes, please.
Yes, correct. The MOU is an agreement, a legal binding document between the Housing Authority and Beacon.
Thank you. Anything further from members of the council? Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, Chair McLean. I just had some general comments and feedback I wanted to offer. That first of all, I appreciate all the additional information we've gotten tonight, along with the very thick packet of information we had gotten at the last meeting, and also the meetings we've had over the last couple of years. It was mentioned what was talked about a couple of years back at the meetings, which I remember. I've attended a lot of meetings. That at first it was 200 plus units and different proposals, and I appreciate the fact that it has evolved. That because of the feedback and when the some of the tenants organized and public comment that the changes were made. Fewer units, 100% affordable. The height after feedback from people who live in the area. So that I'm supportive of the project, and the information we've gotten tonight has even been more helpful. Also, it did take me a while and a bit of reading to understand the designation of the area, and there has been a lot of clarity has been given about that it is a geographical zone, but it's not changing zoning. So that I appreciate all the work that went into to make that a lot more understandable. And also, as I've stated before and was stated tonight, the government is not creating affordable housing anymore. They haven't in many, many years. Public-private partnerships are a path forward. This is creating additional affordable housing for us, and that's not easily done anymore. So I appreciate the proposal in general, that we are creating affordable housing that we really need. And I am comfortable, also the point made tonight, that this is an area that hasn't been generating any any financial resource for the city, and now it will be. So I support the TIF because it's a win-win in my opinion. So I just wanted to offer those thoughts about what we're voting on tonight, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Merkel. Any further questions or comments from the body? Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair McLean. I want to not just echo what Councilor Merkel said, but I think it's instructive that all the city councilors who are not on this committee are at this meeting and were at the last meeting, I believe, or most of them. And so I believe that it's incumbent on this committee to vote this to the January 12th meeting so that we can all weigh in, because I think this is such a transformative, positive project that I think it's important that we all have the ability to express our votes, not just the people in this committee. No offense to the committee itself, which has done good work.
Okay, so if there are no further questions or comments, I'll take one more.
So Gary Gill, 72 Flint Street. I just want to take and apologize for my mistakes tonight. But I really love the project. I saw the drawings. I saw the renderings. I like it. It doesn't fit into the neighborhood, so I heard all that argument. But it's going to give them a whole new place to live. And it's going to be, I have to give my props to Jeff, energy efficient and all of that. So I think it will be a good project, and I just want you to promise the 50 people that they're going to be taken care of. Because at their ages, if she's the only younger one out there, I mean, just think of it as your parent, your aunt, your uncle. Thank you.
Thank you. So, for members of the committee, just to remind you what is actionable before us, we are in the midst of a public hearing, so we need to determine whether to continue that hearing or not, and then we have 2 items before us. One order, the actual creation of the UCHTIF zone, and the other, the approval of the financing instrument related to that zone. So with that, I will entertain a motion, which I cannot make. Councilor Stott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we close the public hearing.
Councilor Stott moves that we close the public hearing, seconded by Councilor Hapworth.
Do we need a roll call for this?
Why don't we take a roll call vote? I don't have any slips. Councilor Hapworth.
Yes.
Councilor Merkel.
Yes.
Councilor Stott.
Yes.
Councilor Watson-Felt.
Yes.
And I am also a yes. So 5 councilors voting, 5 in the affirmative. The public hearing is closed. I will entertain any further motions that anybody would like to make. Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Chair McLean. I would move that we send a positive recommendation to the full council to establish the UCH TIF for Lee Fort Terrace.
Councilor Hapworth moves that we send the first order to the council with a recommendation to approve the creation of the UCHTIF zone.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Stott. I guess we'll do another roll call. Why not? We're doing it. Councilor Hapworth.
Yes.
Councilor Merkel.
Yes.
Councilor Stott.
Yes.
Councilor Watson-Felt.
Yes.
And I am also a yes. It's 5 voting, 5 in the affirmative. The matter carries. Yep. Okay. And I will take a motion on our second order. Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Chair McLean. I'd like to send a positive recommendation, or move to send a positive recommendation to approve the TIF for Lee Fort Terrace.
I'd second.
Councilor Hapworth recommends that we send approval of the TIF to the full council with a recommendation to approve, seconded by Councilor Watson-Felt. Councilor Hapworth.
Yes.
Councilor Merkel.
Yes.
Councilor Stott.
Yes.
Councilor Watson-Felt.
Yes.
And I am also a yes. It's 5 for 5 in the affirmative. The matter carries. Councilor Stott.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. All those in favor? We're adjourned.